On the 1st of April 2026, April Fool's Day, INEC did something that wasn't a joke. They woke up and deleted David Mark, Rauf Aregbesola, and the entire recognized leadership of the ADC from their official portal. Gone, just like that. And they said they were just following a court order. But here's what nobody is asking. If INEC was simply obeying a court, why did it take high-level meetings between INEC leadership, the Presidency, the Court of Appeal, and the Federal High Court all within 60 hours before that statement came out? Why would a supposedly independent Electoral Commission need to meet with the President of Nigeria before interpreting a court ruling? And here's the question I want you to hold in your mind for the next 30 minutes. Is INEC actually independent anymore, or has it become a political weapon? Because the answer to that question changes everything about the 2027 election. Before we go any deeper, if you're just finding Naijanewsfeed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics without the noise, without the spin, and without taking sides. Just the facts, just the analysis. Hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me because this story gets very interesting very fast. Let me build the picture for you from the beginning because this didn't start on April 1st. It started over a year ago. After the 2023 elections, Nigeria's major opposition figures, Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, Rabiu Kwankwaso, Nasir El-Rufai, Rotimi Amaechi, realized they had lost partly because they were scattered. They needed one platform to challenge Tinubu and the APC in 2027. They first looked at the Social Democratic Party. That didn't work. Insiders say the SDP had already been infiltrated. Then they looked at the African Democratic Congress, the ADC, a smaller party that was willing to open its doors. By June 2025, a high-profile launch happened in Abuja. David Mark, the former Senate president, was named interim national chairman. Rauf Aregbesola, former Osun governor, became national secretary. Peter Obi, Atiku, Kwankwaso, they all aligned with this platform. The coalition was officially born. But the ADC had its own old members, people who had been in that party for years. And some of them were not happy about these political heavyweights coming in and taking over the structure. That's where one Nafiu Bala Gombe comes in. Nafiu was the former deputy chairman of the ADC. He had already resigned his position in May 2025. Let me say that again. He had already resigned. 4 months later, in September 2025, he went to court claiming to be the rightful leader of the party. The court case started, and that's the hook that's now being used to pull the whole ADC down. Now, you might be thinking, okay, a court case, political dispute, this happens all the time in Nigerian politics. Fair. But what happened next is where this goes from a party squabble to a national crisis. Let's look at how INEC is supposed to work, because the institution's behavior in this case is at the heart of everything. The Independent National Electoral Commission is established under Section 153 of the Nigerian Constitution. Its mandate is to register and regulate political parties, conduct elections, and ensure that those elections are free and fair. The word independent is literally in its name. When there's an internal party leadership dispute that ends up in court, INEC generally has the practice of maintaining the status quo. Whoever they last officially recognized stays in place until the courts resolve the matter. Now, here's what actually happened in this case. In July 2025, the ADC held a National Executive Committee, a NEC, meeting to formalize the new coalition leadership. INEC sent its own officials to monitor that meeting. They documented it, they filed their reports, and by September 2025, INEC had officially uploaded David Mark and Rauf Aregbesola onto its portal as the recognized leaders of the ADC. Then Nafiu Gombe filed his court case. The Court of Appeal issued what lawyers call a status quo antebellum order, meaning maintain the situation as it was before the dispute began. And INEC, instead of returning to court for clarification on exactly what that meant, chose to interpret the order themselves. They decided on April 1, 2026, that the status quo meant reverting to before their own September recognition, essentially erasing a leadership they had already verified and confirmed. Now, Professor Chidi Odinkalu made a very pointed observation. He said it is not the business of INEC to interpret the decision of the Court of Appeal. That is the job of the judiciary. For an electoral commission to step in and apply its own reading of a judicial ruling, that's a constitutional gray area. And critics say it's exactly the kind of gray area that's being exploited here.
Now we get to what Naijanewsfeed is really about. Let's talk about the chess game. Who benefits? The APC and President Tinubu are 14 months away from the 2027 election campaign season. By any honest assessment, the economic environment is not in their favor. Food prices are still painfully high. The naira has been through a devaluation trauma. Insecurity continues across the Middle Belt and the North. David Mark himself said it clearly at their press conference. They know that Nigerians will not want this to continue. They know Nigerians will vote them out. So, what do you do when you can't win on performance? You limit the competition. And this is not a new strategy in Nigerian politics. You've seen it before. Create a crisis inside an opposition party, let the courts get involved, and suddenly the party is paralyzed and unable to present a candidate. The pre-signed resignation letter. Here's your first pattern interrupt, the detail that changes everything. Professor Odinkalu revealed on X, formerly Twitter, that INEC's April 1st statement was issued after intense 60-hour meetings involving senior INEC officials, the Presidency, the Court of Appeal, and the Federal High Court, and then he dropped this. He claimed there is a pre-signed resignation letter from INEC Chairman Prof Amupitan, held by the Presidency. Think about what that means. If true, it means the INEC chairman is not independent. He holds office conditionally, and the condition is compliance. One wrong move, or in this case, one right move, and that letter gets activated and he's gone. The presidency spokesman, Bayo Onanuga, dismissed all of this. He said Tinubu had nothing to do with ADC's internal crisis. He called it self-inflicted. But here's the thing. You don't hold emergency 60-hour multi-branch government meetings over a simple court order compliance issue. That level of urgency suggests high-level direction. The bigger pattern. This is not isolated. According to Peter Obi's media office, since 2023, the Tinubu administration has systematically injected crises into opposition parties. The Labour Party split into factions, Julius Abure faction versus Obi-aligned leadership, courts going back and forth, Supreme Court rulings ignored by lower courts. PDP, Atiku and YK's crisis deepened the fracture that began in 2022. SDP, reports of infiltration that forced the coalition to abandon it. ADC, now being hit through a combination of a disgruntled former member, sympathetic courts, and INEC's convenient interpretation of a ruling. The pattern, if you follow it, is consistent. Identify the opposition's platform, inject a legal or factional crisis, use INEC to enforce confusion, and watch the coalition lose time, money, and momentum preparing for 2027. Who are the silent players? The man you haven't heard speak in this whole saga is Nafiu Bala Gombe. The man who resigned, waited 4 months, then went to court to reclaim the chairmanship he voluntarily left. He is the legal lever in this game. Who is backing him? Who is funding the litigation? Those are the questions nobody is publicly answering yet, and they are the most important questions. Also watch the Court of Appeal. The March 12th ruling that triggered all of this was a status quo antebellum order. Courts issue these to protect parties while they hear a case. It's supposed to be procedurally neutral, but INEC's application of it was nothing but neutral. Who influenced how that order was worded? That's worth watching. Electoral map implications. ADC needs to be a functioning party to present candidates for the Osun governorship in August 2026 and the Ekiti governorship in June 2026, both coming up before the 2027 presidential race. If INEC doesn't recognize their leadership, those candidacies are in jeopardy. That's 2 states where the opposition loses a lane before 2027 even begins.
There's an amendment to the Electoral Act I haven't mentioned yet, one that was reportedly designed specifically to target the ADC coalition. I'll be coming back to that when we get to the national implications. Now, if what I've just laid out surprises you, I want to hear your reaction. Drop a comment below. Tell me, do you think INEC is acting independently or has it been captured? I want to know what Nigerians are actually thinking before we get to the part that ties all of this together. And listen, if this kind of analysis is useful to you, the single most important thing you can do to help me keep making it is to subscribe to this channel. It costs you nothing, but it tells YouTube that this content matters, and that means more Nigerians get to see it. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's keep going. Let's zoom out, because this is bigger than the ADC. Nigeria has practiced uninterrupted democracy since 1999. In that time, we've had peaceful transfers of power between the PDP and APC, but what we've never really had is a fully functioning multi-party system. The APC and PDP have dominated everything. The ADC coalition represented for the first time a genuine attempt to build a third major platform, not a vanity project, but a coalition of genuinely competitive politicians with national reach. If that platform is dismantled before 2027 through INEC interference, court injunctions, and factional crises, Nigeria essentially goes into a two-party system where one party controls the federal government and the Electoral Commission. That is not a functioning democracy. That is performance democracy. Peter Obi said it plainly at the Occupy INEC protest. We cannot have a one-party system in our country. Rotimi Amaechi, who is APC to the bone and served in Tinubu's predecessor's cabinet, was at that same protest, which tells you how serious the threat is perceived to be, even by people who were recently on the ruling side. The Electoral Act Amendment. Earlier, I mentioned an Electoral Act amendment. Obi's media office specifically alleged that the APC pushed a legislative change designed to exert financial or structural pressure on the ADC. The specifics are still being litigated publicly, but the allegation is that the amendment was designed to make it harder for a coalition of this nature to formally merge or field candidates under a unified banner. I'll be doing a dedicated video on that amendment. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Impact on ordinary Nigerians. Here's what this means for the ordinary Nigerian who may not be a party member, may not be political. It means your choice in 2027 may be narrowed before you enter the voting booth. If Tinubu's main opposition can't field a credible candidate because their party was legally paralyzed, then the election outcome is partly predetermined. And in a country where the government's economic performance has been as painful as it has been since 2023, that removal of a genuine alternative is deeply consequential. This section is relevant because the international community is watching. David Mark at the ADC press conference on April 2nd did something unusual. He directly called on the international community to take note of INEC's actions. He asked foreign observers to hold accountable those who are undermining the integrity of the electoral process. That's significant because it signals the ADC is prepared to internationalize this dispute if domestic institutions fail them. The United States and the European Union both have stated interests in Nigeria's democratic stability. The U.S. State Department regularly monitors Nigerian elections and has raised concerns about INEC's independence in past cycles. If credible evidence emerges that INEC is being directed by the presidency and the Odinkalu allegation about the pre-signed resignation letter is exactly that kind of evidence, you could see diplomatic statements, election observation missions being deployed earlier than usual, and potentially conditions tied to aid or trade agreements. For Nigerians in the diaspora, particularly in the UK, US, and Canada, this is your sign to start watching the 2027 situation very carefully. The diaspora community remits billions of dollars into Nigeria annually. Your stake in who governs that country is enormous. And what's happening with the ADC right now is a preview of how competitive the 2027 election will or will not be.
Let me still man the other side, because you should always understand the strongest version of an argument before you dismiss it. The APC's argument is this: INEC acted in compliance with the court order. They did not target the ADC. If the ADC's leadership is in dispute, INEC cannot take sides, it has to defer to the courts. Olatunbosun Oyintiloye, an APC chieftain, made exactly this point. He said Tinubu is not a court of law. The ruling party didn't file Gombe's lawsuit. And if the ADC's internal processes were clean, they wouldn't be in court in the first place. That's a fair-sounding argument, but here's where it falls apart. Point 1. INEC already recognized the MAC-led leadership in September 2025. They uploaded the names onto their portal after verifying the process. If INEC was comfortable enough to recognize that leadership then, including after observing the July NEC meeting, why did a court order months later cause them to reverse that recognition without seeking judicial clarification? Point 2. The timing and the meetings. If this was a straightforward procedural court compliance issue, why did it require 60 hours of emergency meetings between INEC, the Presidency, and 2 courts? That's not normal procedure for a routine court order compliance. That is crisis management, and it suggests the people in those rooms knew the implications of what they were doing. Point 3. The pattern. If you look at Labour Party, PDP, SDP, and now ADC, the same playbook keeps appearing. A faction emerges, legal disputes follow, INEC is drawn in, the party is paralyzed. That pattern is not a coincidence. It is either a deliberate strategy or the most remarkable streak of bad luck in Nigerian political history. What people are getting wrong? Some people are saying the ADC deserves this because they rushed to merge without cleaning up their internal structure. That may be true as a criticism, but it doesn't address whether state actors are deliberately exploiting that messiness. The ADC's internal disorder doesn't justify an electoral commission acting as a political tool. Here's what I'm watching. Here's what you should watch. Most likely next moves. The ADC pressed ahead with its congresses. They started April 9th, and their national convention is set for April 14th. They've said clearly that INEC's presence is not legally required for internal party processes, so they are forging ahead. The key question is, will INEC recognize the outcomes of those congresses? If they don't, the party's ability to file candidates for Osun and Ekiti becomes legally challenged. Watch the Federal High Court. The substantive case, Gombe's challenge, hasn't been determined yet. The Court of Appeal's status quo order was procedural, not a ruling on the merits. When the FHC delivers its decision on whether Gombe has any valid standing at all, given that he had already resigned before filing, that ruling could reset the entire board. Watch Peter Obi's formal status. He had not formally resigned from Labour Party as at recent reports. That dual membership is a time bomb. If he doesn't formally land in ADC, the coalition's presidential flag-bearer ambition is still hanging in the air. Escalation signals to watch. Any INEC refusal to process ADC's April convention results. Any fresh court injunction blocking the convention itself. Foreign diplomatic statements, particularly from the U.S. Embassy in Abuja. Any sudden judicial resolution in Gombe's favor that looks politically convenient. Best case, the Federal High Court dismisses Gombe's case on the grounds that he had no legal standing after his own resignation. INEC is compelled to restore the MAC-led leadership. The coalition consolidates, fields candidates for Osun and Ekiti, and enters 2027 intact. Worst case, the legal proceedings drag on through 2026. INEC continues to refuse recognition, Osun and Ekiti elections pass without ADC participation, coalition morale collapses, key figures drift back to their old parties or cut separate deals, and by January 2027, the most formidable opposition coalition Nigeria has seen in a decade quietly dissolves without a single vote being cast against it. Long-term impact? If Nigerian institutions, the courts, INEC, the legislature, continue to be used to manage political competition rather than adjudicate it fairly, the damage extends well beyond any one election. It tells the Nigerian public that the rules only apply to those outside power. That erosion of trust in institutions is the slow poison that turns democracies into something else. From the very beginning, I asked you, is INEC still independent? Here's my honest answer.
I asked you at the top of this video, is INEC still independent? Based on everything we've laid out today, the 60-hour emergency meetings with the presidency, the allegation of a pre-signed resignation letter,
the reversal of a recognition INEC itself had already made, the pattern of opposition parties collapsing under the same legal and institutional pressure. I think the honest answer is, right now, we don't know. And that uncertainty is itself the problem. A genuinely independent INEC would not need to meet with the President of Nigeria before deciding how to interpret a court order. A genuinely independent INEC would return to the Court of Appeal for clarification when a ruling was ambiguous, not interpret it themselves in a way that happens to disadvantage the ruling party's biggest political threat. Whether that means INEC has been fully captured or whether it's operating under partial pressure while still maintaining some procedural cover, the outcome for Nigerian democracy is the same. The opposition's most credible 2027 platform is in crisis. This is not just about ADC, this is about whether Nigeria can hold a genuinely competitive election in 2027. And that question should matter to every Nigerian, regardless of who you support. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Do you think the ADC coalition survives? Do you think INEC acted in good faith? Or do you see the same pattern I see? If this breakdown gave you clarity on what's really happening, do me one favor. Share it with someone who needs to understand this. Just one person. That's how we grow this conversation. And if you want to help me keep making content like this, content that goes deep, that doesn't take sides, that gives you the real picture, the only thing you need to do is subscribe to Nigeriannewsfeed. That subscription is literally what tells YouTube this channel is worth pushing to more people. It costs you nothing and it means everything to keeping this work going. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.